Joining us now is Christopher Mathias, HuffPost New York associate editor. Hey there, Christopher.
Hey, how are you?
New York City is still planning to have the marathon go on, and this is despite Hurricane Sandy, despite the fact that many people are still without any power, without water. And as I can imagine, there are a lot of unhappy people over this. Can you tell us more?
Holding the marathon will divert a lot of resources away from the disaster areas that Dan was just describing. And you have a lot of local politicians, city council members, state senators all chiming in and saying that the race really needs to be either postponed or just straight up canceled.
Do you get the feeling, I guess, one of the justifications for continuing on with the marathon is that this heightens the sense of morale?
Chris, let me bring this back to you. Do you think that is it good for morale?
I mean, that's certainly an argument you're hearing a lot of people making, including Mayor Michael Bloomberg. I think the critics of that will say that it's just too soon and probably a little too insensitive. And also, the Yankees game's one thing. The marathon is a very big undertaking. You're talking about 8,000 volunteers showing up for a race of some 47,000 people over a 26.2-mile course that carves its way through 5 boroughs.
And it starts in Staten Island, which has been incredibly devastated by the storm. Not just the spill and Arthur kills, which we talked about yesterday, but there are many people who have lost their lives on Staten Island. And we were just speaking, as you heard, with the spokesman for the borough president in Queens. The borough president in Staten Island was furious yesterday about the lack of a response on Staten Island.
Yeah, well, that was the, as this week's progressed, I think what you're seeing is basically, when the story started, it was mostly about Lower Manhattan. But as the weeks progressed, you start to see footage from, kind of the outer boroughs. And Staten Island was largely forgotten. And I think people were very frustrated about that, as you saw from the borough president yesterday, which is why I think a lot of people on Staten Island, like City Council member James Otto, is particularly, angry that the race is going on. Because like you said, it starts in Staten Island. And so much of Staten Island is just in such destruction and disarray right now.
Well, what about, when people run the New York City Marathon, obviously, often this is for a cause. There's a lot of money that ends up being raised.
The marathon's donating $1 million, we should say, to the relief efforts. Yeah.
Okay, well, I was just wondering if there was any more, right? If you end up having individuals that are participating, choosing to contribute.
Hey, have we heard anything about that?
Not too much. The chief of the New York Roadrunners, who organizes the race, said that they would raise money for the for relief efforts. However, I think you'll hear a lot of people argue that that's good, obviously, but in the long run, it might be better for all these volunteers that are in town for the marathon to actually help out with the relief effort. And I talked to State Senator Liz Krueger yesterday, who represents a large section of the eastern side of Manhattan. And she even made the suggestion that runners in town could be a valuable resource because they could—
As volunteers, yeah.
Yeah, because they could actually run up 80 flights of stairs to, check on the elderly or whoever might be stuck.
And it's a good point. These marathons, they require ambulances, I think. I don't know if at every mile marker, but this is a 26-mile race. You need lots of security officials, NYPD, FDNY, the EMS, because inevitably people are going to get dehydrated, people are going to get tired on the racetrack, and there's a big question: what do New Yorkers say about taking those resources from the PD, from the fire department, and putting them on the race course?
Well, yeah, that's the whole outcry, is that they're very precious resources right now. The emergency responders, they're stretched kind of thin, and the other city agency that will have to be used for this is the Parks Department, because a large part of the race actually goes through Central Park,
And Chris, not just
so,
not just the Parks Department, but the Department of Transportation, the Department of Citywide Administrative Services in New York City. As a former New York City employee, I know there are a lot of departments that'll have to be mobilized. The 311 call center will probably be called a lot because of the marathon. And you know, listen, on the one hand, it might be a good thing for morale, but there's no denying it will be a strain on the resources of the city too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one thing that I've heard a lot of people be upset about, particularly, is that, you know, that they're going to devote resources to cleaning up parks that are closed already, while there's still people, you know, struggling for food in Staten Island and in Queens. You know, what's the point of cleaning up branches and making sure trees aren't falling down in a park that people can't even go into?